wonderful to see so many people here. Thank you for coming. We're excited about today's program and the chance to delve into the book a little deeper, Kent, as we get to it. So, just a few things we want to touch base with. I want to thank you for joining us for the One Community, One Book Read. This book this year, of course, is Lone Dog Road by Kent and Nerburn. And it's a compelling drama of two little boys on run from the government agency during a draft-speaking time of the 1950s. We are quickly drawn into the boys' ordeal as they flee, encountering many who support them along the way. The story is told from a Native and a non-Native American viewpoint and gives us much to consider. There are many collaborators that work behind the scenes to get this program pulled together today. There is the One Book, One Community Read. There's the Hutchinson Connect group, Hutchinson Health, Hutchinson Station Newspaper, and the Hutchinson Public Library. We also are indebted to the bookkeepers, our local independent bookstore, something that we are very proud of here and glad that we have. And by the way, yes. There are a complete set of all the books that have been community book reads over the last 11 years, Mary?
I think it's 14.
Yeah. So they're out there and they're for sale, and we would encourage you to take a look. You might find something you enjoy. We also want to point out that the HCTV was here, or VN, I guess it's called, is recording this today, so it'll eventually be on the cable network sometime. The One Book, One Community Read is made possible and thanks through Friends of the Hutchinson Public Library and Tri-Event. The funding for today's author event is made possible thanks to a grant through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. That's part of that tax that we pay every year for a little bit to improve our trails and our things, and that will be coming up for renewal in a few years. Today's feature, Kent, is an award-winning Minnesota author, sculptor, and educator, known for his work focusing upon Native American culture and spirituality. He's written 18 books of creative nonfiction and essays, along with the Lone Dog Road, which is his only novel. He's a two-time winner of the American Book Award. William Kent Kruger, who's a popular person in this area, says this about Kent's book: it's beautiful and breathtaking, and it's warm-hearted in its humanity. Kent is a storyteller to be celebrated, and Lone Dog is a story to be treasured. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Kent, and you want the mic. Okay.
Thank you, and you know how if you have a dog, you know how they have a tough time trying to find a way to lie down, find their spot? Well, I'm that dog right now, so I'm going to be getting up and moving around. I'm starting out sitting here because I recognize a common demographic, and knees, backs, ankles. I take my sitting down time when I can. But I'm very happy that you chose this book, because it's a very important book to me. It was not a book I really intended to write. Well, let me back up one step. How many of you have read the book? Okay, good. So I don't have to read passages from it, which is what I have a standard spiel that I've done going around with it, but it's very often going to libraries where folks just come in for something to do and they haven't read the book, so I read parts from it. But in this case, my honest hope is that you will, crack your Minnesota selves open and ask questions. I want to talk to you about the book. I want to learn about the book from you. Because that might sound as if I'm being patronizing, but it's true. I didn't know what I had when I wrote wrote this book. I was very confused about it, and it was not a simple book for me. It was a challenge, and that's where I'll start this whole thing. This book is what I call my elder book. You know, I'm a big proponent of Native values because I worked in Native American issues for years, lived with the Native people, and I gather many of you have been involved with the Dakota people down here. I worked with the Ojibwe for years. I worked with the Lakota. I did some time with the Nez Perce, and I really took in Native values as a part of a way of understanding the world. One of the things that they say is they don't look at life as I was raised to look at life as a straight line between birth and death, where you've got your childhood and then your time of productivity and fecundity, and then you gradually retire and hand it off to the next generation. For the Native people, life is a circle. It's seasons. And they feel that only the person in the fourth season is the one who has seen it all. And so it's incumbent upon you, when you get to that fourth season, to give back. And so in my case, that meant as a writer that I needed to give back some of what I had learned in the course of my life. And so this became my elder book. And I said, what was my elder book going to be? It came at, actually it came at a funny time. And it started when the pandemic hit. My wife and I were living in Oregon. We'd been in northern Minnesota for 25 years. I'm born and raised in the Twin Cities, but we'd been in Bemidji for 25 years and moved out to Oregon to be, it was sort of, we called it the grandparent diaspora, because all the grandparents that went out to be with their kids who had all moved out to the West Coast. And we'd spent 10 years there and absolutely loved it. But along came the pandemic, and suddenly we're isolated in our own little rooms, and it's like I felt distant, I felt disconnected, and my cardiologist, we all have our various doctors. I went into him, and he, at the start of the pandemic, he's looking at all the things, and he said, you've got every comorbidity and every risk factor except smoking. Maybe you should start. And I said, thanks, doc. But it was true. I felt my mortality, and said, I've got to write a book that matters. So what is it that I can do? What is it that will put together the themes and issues that matter to me in the course of my life? And so I sat down to write a book, and this book, it contains 4 elements that were absolutely essential to me, that I shouldn't say were essential, that mattered to me, things that I cared about and thought I could speak of with a sense of love and concern. The first one is, it's about the Dakotas. I'm in love with the Dakotas. I don't know exactly how it happened, but the singularity of North Dakota, where you just, I remember writing in one of my books that there was nothing out there, but the moon was the largest thing. And the wind comes down from Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba, and you feel these presentiments from a great distance. And I love that about North Dakota. And South Dakota, because it has that disjunction between the East River and West River, that radical change from the farm country that we all know around here, the humidity and the crops and insects and just farm country that grows things. Then suddenly at the Missouri River, because that was pretty much where the glacier stopped, on the other side of that, it's the seabed. It's the volcanic country. It's rolling hills. It goes from farmland to grazing land, and that when I discovered that, it just changed me as a kid. The shock of a different reality never got out of my system. And plus, I've done enough work with the Lakota out in Pine Ridge in that area that I love the Dakotas. Something about them captured me more than even the northern Minnesota woods that I love so much, the woods in Lake Superior. So anyway, I wanted it to be about the Dakotas. I wanted it to speak to Native values, because I really think that Native values are very important to us. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but I think they're the elder cultures on this land. And though there has been, a lot of who they were has been destroyed over the years by process of assimilation, acculturation, and just attempts by the U.S. government to destroy their people. They've lost a lot of who they are on the surface, but underneath there are values that you run into that I think are very important. Values of caring for family, a larger sense of family, a different feel for a prayerful relationship to things. That they would, like when I would work with them, they would, my kids on Red Lake, when I worked with them on Red Lake, they would, if you said to a normal white kid, now we're going to pray, they're all going to head for they're going to head for the exits, and I might be right along there with them. But the Native kids, you say, bring out the drum, and they're all respectful. The pipe comes out, they're respectful. This feeling of spirituality inheres in their way of living. They have a larger sense of family that, we have our nuclear family with father and mother, and then it goes out to the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, and then it gradually dissipates like a stone in a pond. But for the Native people, like I had a student, one who came in one day early on when I was teaching up on Red Lake, and she said, I didn't go home last night. Well, I'm a city kid, and I said, oh my God, we got troubles here. I said, where'd you go? I said, I went to my auntie's. And I soon learned that the auntie was another mother, and that the uncle had the responsibility of being forming the moral sense of the boy, of a son, because the father was felt to be either too indulgent or too distant, or too strict. So the uncle was usually the person that had the responsibility for the moral formation of a boy, and the grandmother's jobs were to teach the girls traditions of the traditional handicrafts, and the grandparents' jobs, the grandfather's job was to hand along the knowledge of the people, and just a different feeling for family. There were so many values among Native people that I said needed to be shared, and I wanted to do a book that spoke to those Native values as well. And then the land as a living force. That's very important to me. I've always believed that the land in my books is a character as strong as any of the people, because I think we're shaped by the land. One of the things I've seen in working with Native people as well as everyone else is that we're Native people, non-Native people, black, white, whatever, the land shapes who we are. And when we live together on land, under common weather, under common light, common sky, common seasons, there's a commonality to our experience. And the power of the land was something I wanted to communicate in this book as well. And then lastly, I mentioned the spiritual sense. I really believe that, I believe that there is a sense of mystery at the heart of life, and that it's been taken from us. We live in such a practical world now that the feeling of the sacred in the everyday gets lost. So those were the values that I wanted to try to communicate in any book that I was going to write. So how could I deal with this? And what sort of book could I write? Well, there was one other issue that was bothering me, and it still bothers me. We're so divided as people right now. We're so angry. Everybody's angry. And I'm angry. I don't know, maybe you're not as angry as I am. Everybody's angry at something. Americans are angry. We're angry people. We're divided people. We don't use our uniqueness in a good way. Our uniqueness is seen to separate us. We don't speak to the commonality of who we are. The fact that everyone, I don't care who you are, you all want your kids to do better than you did in life. You want to have more joy than sadness. You want to help people. People are good people, and this sort of common goodness in the human heart, I thought I needed to write a book that spoke to that. So that was why when I sat down to write Lone Dog Road, I was really looking for a book that had a hopeful character to it, a redemptive character to it. I wanted it to speak to the uniqueness of the individuals, but I also wanted it to have the commonality that we're all involved in a common purpose, and that maybe, just maybe, the world we live in has a bigger purpose, and we all have a bigger purpose than we know. So I wanted to create good people who were struggling. I mean, it's a book full of people who are broken people. And they're not necessarily in a bad way, but they're all trying to, someone said to me, oh, they're all looking for home. That's what that book is about, people looking for home. I said, okay, that I'll take that. That sounds good to me. And so I wanted to do a book that spoke to these values these issues that I thought were important, that spoke to our need for redemption and hope and common goodness and common clarity, and that I would do it in a very unique way. And that was where I said I didn't know what I had as a book. I'd never written a book like this before. There is no narrator in this book. There are narrators, but there's no narrator. There is no overall narrative arc that some third-person narrator or first-person narrator might have. And when you look at my other books, I assume some of you probably have known Neither Wolf Nor Dog, The Wolf in Twilight, and The Girl Who Sang in the Buffalo, which is the trilogy of native works that I'm probably best known for. In those cases, I was the narrator telling the story, and I would try to get out of the way and be clear water to the stories that were told in the book, but there was always a narrative presence. In Lone Dog Road, I said, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to let each of the people speak. And it was a big risk, and it was not a popular thing given the way the world works right now. We're all sort of siloed and balkanized. You're only supposed to be able to speak from within your own group. And so here's this old white guy thinking he can write a book that has a black man, a black troubadour in it, that has little native boys, that has native women of different sorts, different points of view and different cultures. And there was a kind of a petulance on my part saying, I can do this. I know how to do this. I care about these different people. These are all people that touch somewhere on my experience in life, and I love them all, and I can write from love with love about each of these people. And no one can tell me I can't. And so I decided, instead of having a narrator over the top, I was going to let each of them tell his or her part of the story. And they all speak very intimately. Danton was the hardest one. Because like if you think of the way the book starts, I got the boys, and the boys start right on the train, and Reuben's saying, and Levi's saying, sit down, Reuben, sit down. And Reuben's saying, no, I don't want to sit down. But you're right there in it. When we get to Danton, and he shows up, he says, I guess it all began the day I had to put a sweet girl down. He didn't start out like the boys did, saying, oh my God, I just had to put my dog down. My heart's broken. What am I going to do? What sort of life do I have? He was distant, a little bit distant. And he bothered me because of that. He felt too much like a narrator, which is, by the way, why I killed his dog right at the beginning. Because I said, that will humanize him. Dogs matter. Lone Dog Road, neither wolf nor dog. Dog. Dogs are... If there is a divine presence on earth that we don't notice, I think it's in dogs. And so anyway, by doing that, by killing Danton's dog early on, that humanized him for me. The rest of them, what I had to do was enter into the characters and become them. I had to act them out in my own mind, in my own heart. And I'm pretty good at that. Every writer, every person in every realm, but specifically in writing, has certain things that he or she does well, and certain things you don't do as well. I've got a very good capacity for empathy, and I have a very good ear. I'm a slow reader. That's my dirty little secret. I'm a sub-vocalizer, and so I read slowly, and when I write to be read slowly, to be heard. And so I spend my time listening. I've always been a listener. And so I listen to people's cadences. I listen to the spaces in their language. I listen to the tonalities. I watch the distances people keep between themselves and others and among themselves. So I'm very attentive to the nuances of character in a very deep sense. And so I said, I know how to find these people. I've spent my life being a listener, being a watcher. And now I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to see if I can make these people all feel real. And like I said, Daniel was the hardest one. The rest of them were relatively easy. And what I would do is I would, here in my pandemic-induced isolation, went to my little room in the basement of our house where I had my office, and it literally was a room in a basement, and I would enter into these characters one by one, and I would write. Today I'm going to see what Dan is thinking. Today I'm going to see what Ida is thinking, and they became my friends during the pandemic. They became my identity during the pandemic, and so each of them would talk, and I would. It was kind of like, they choose me, who's going to talk today? And I would enter into the characters and I'd be able to write from within them very easily and comfortably. And when I got done, it was like I had to shake myself out of the reality of those individual characters. But the difficulty became, if you have each of these characters talking, where's the story? Who's telling the story? What is the story? And I'm not someone, I like to say that there are two types. I actually wrote a book where I talked about this at one time, about the ways of doing art. And there are people who are architects, and there are people who are gardeners. And I'm an architect. I'm not an architect, I'm a gardener. I talked about Ken Kruger, a friend of mine, and he says he figures out when the book ends, and then he writes to get to it. And he doesn't have any problem. He cranks out, it seems like a book every 15 minutes, and they're good books. But that's his way of working. In my case, I was trained as a sculptor. I think as a visual artist, I have to create the scene. And when I paint the scene in my mind's eye, I see it, and then I let the characters wander into it. And it's imperative for me that, first of all, that you people as readers understand, you see what I see in that scene. So I paint a picture for you. I'm never going to just say, that he picked up a cigarette and smoked a cigarette. I'm going to say, he reached in his pocket for his pack of Lucky Strikes and put the pack up to his mouth, pulled a cigarette out in a practiced fashion, and struck a farmer's match on the side of his jeans, and lit it, and on like that. And sometimes I go on too long about that, but the fact is that you're going to see what it is, that the situation. There was some author I was reading recently who said, no, I want their imaginations to work. I'm just not going to tell them what the people look like. I'm not going to tell them anything. It's because that's where they participate in the book, in the work. I don't think that way. I want you to know what the setting is. I want you to feel the setting. I want you to understand where you are. I want you to, all the senses I want to be activated. And then once the setting is established, you can walk into it along with the characters, and I walk into it along with the characters. And they interact and talk to each other, or maybe in this case, they tell their story, and then they get done, and someone else comes in. Well, this is what I'm doing in the course of this whole book, and I didn't know where it was going. I felt like maybe I'd say, well, Ida has a little more to say at this point. Or Carl Martin was a tough one, because he talked a number of times that he got his parts cut, because he was very theoretical, and people say, you know, well, you can't, I think Dan was really you. And I said, no, Dan was half of me. Karl Marx was the other half of me. The guy with the PhD in theology and, you know, anguishing constantly about moral issues. And so once I got going on Karl Marx, it was easy for me to anguish with Karl Marx. But when I went back and started looking at this, he's going on and on, over and over. And so he had some of his chapters thrown out. And when I got done, I had, you know, I just kept writing and writing and found my way to the end of the book. I was thrilled with what happened in the book. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't even know why Two Fingers were called Two Fingers at the beginning. I didn't know any of this. I just knew these characters and put them down. And they wandered through life interacting with each other and interacting with the situation. And I got done and I looked at it and I started reading and I did the word count, 700 pages. I said, oh man, the publishers wouldn't even touch it. They said, 350 pages is what we want. And I said, I can't do it. And so I ended up cutting it down to, I think we're at 450 or 500 now. And I can write that long. I'm not sure I can read that long. And congratulations to those of you who have made it through. But I didn't know how this was going to play itself out. I didn't know how the people were going to interact with each other. It was a constant discovery. I'm not the architect. I'm the gardener. I would plant something and let it grow. And then I'd be walking through the garden of the characters and the situations, say, oh, look at this, and hold it up and take a look at it, and find something absolutely beautiful. When I discovered how it was, why Ree was the way that she was, that was very poignant to me. And when I discovered, you know, when Two Finger had his conversion experience, I was so happy about that. I'm writing early on, and I've got old Bone Dog with a baseball in his hand. You know, and the only reason I did that is because in my working with Native people, the old guys, a lot of them were baseball players, and they loved talking about baseball. And they all played on these teams. You know, when I did interviews with the students years ago on Red Lake, we'd go out and we'd interview the elders, and they would, you know, the old guys would talk about baseball. So I decided, well, I'm going to have Lone Dog, you know, he's going to play baseball. He's going to have played baseball. Little did I know that was going to end up being the connection with Two Finger at the end. But so this sort of very odd developmental process was like something I had never done. And when I got done with this, I looked at this and said, have I got a mess here? Does this even hold together at all? And my wife, who, she's not here, so I can speak the truth. She doesn't like my writing that much, I don't think. But she's much more practical than I am. And, you know, if you got a wife or a husband, you know, all it takes is a flare of the nostril or a turn of the eyebrow or something. You know what they're thinking. And so she'll read my books and say, well, it's a nice book. It's a nice book. I say, thanks a lot. In other words, it's no good. So I'm going to go, do I slit my throat or do I continue on my merry way? Well, in this case, she got done with the book and said, it's a wonderful book. And so I said, if she said that, and then the man who ended up being my publisher read it and said, this is one of the best novels I've read. I love it. And suddenly, I felt good about this book, but I didn't know. And that's why I say, if I get done here, you know, and I don't seem to be doing very well at speaking in a short manner like I said I would, I'd like to know what you thought, because it was important to me that when we put it out there, well, I had my wife liked it and my publisher liked it. They were very different personalities, but I didn't know, and I needed to hear back from people what they thought about this book. So it's proven thus far to be it's been loved. It's a well-loved book. It's got a bigger heart than I thought it had. The people like its intimacy. They like the fact that the characters speak so closely from their own emotional realities, and by and large, they trust the characters. I haven't had anyone say, absolute false note, that character doesn't work, I don't believe that character a bit. And if I pulled that off, where everyone believes each of the characters, and the story works, well, I've got myself a good book. Well, anyway, I want to tell you two things, and then I want to respond to your questions. It's kind of interesting where this book actually came from when I sat down to write. There were two places that I said, I have to be authentic. I have to be authentic. The only way I'm able to write is when I really feel something, when I really believe in it. I can't do works for hire. I can't do works that just seem like something would be interesting to me. I've got to believe it. I mean, I'm saving my soul when I write. That's the way I look at it. It's a moral obligation to me to believe in the works that I do. So where was I going to find this book? Well, there were two places that I knew I could go. One was, I'm fascinated with kids, people who, they talk about them being on the spectrum, they talk about them, having Asperger's or something. That's not what I mean. I mean the kids who one day come, sit down at the piano at age 4 and play Mozart when they've never even heard of Mozart, or they hear Mozart being played and they sit down and copy it. Or they take a kid on a trip to Scotland and she looks around in the village and says, oh, I know this house, this house, this house. I remember who lived there. I remember who lived there. Where do these people come from? What is the nature of that reality? That's the bigger spiritual truth and the bigger mystery in life that constantly fascinates me and has me genuflecting before the mystery of the life that we live. So I thought I'd like to have a kid like that in the book. That would be one place I could start. The other place is, in 1989, I went to work on the Red Lake Reservation. That was where I first got interested in Native issues and Native affairs. And I ran an oral history project that the students and I went out and interviewed the tribal elders. And we produced a book, produced two actually, this one called To Walk the Red Road, where they interviewed the elders and the elders told their stories, and sometimes they were elevated stories, sometimes they were like about a guy playing baseball. But when we got done, what we didn't have were photographs, because though the people had their stories, they very often hadn't had photographs taken, or they didn't remember, the photographs had been destroyed. So we went to the Minnesota Historical Society. I took a load of the kids up in a van. We went to the Minnesota Historical Society. We went to St. John's, to their archives. We went to little local historical societies in Beltrami and Pennington County, and just looked at old photographs. And we took the photographs. We said, well, they have to be Ojibwe, and ideally they should be Red Lakers. And so the book is full of, you can't see it, but you get the idea that there's a photo on the page, so it isn't just a page of text, because a lot of the old folks can't see as well, or they didn't, some of them couldn't read very well. They needed the pictures. And people love to look at old pictures. Pictures when you were a kid, you start to try to clean out your attic, and you say, I'm going to throw these pictures away, and after 15 minutes, or after 5 hours, you've got through 10 pages or 10 pictures, because they're all bring back stories. That's what we were doing. All right, so in the process of doing this, we came up with one, here's where, watch me stand up. Nothing to it. Oh, Lord Almighty. But what we did, there was one picture that haunted me. So I'm up right here. This little guy. I'll bring him down to the front of the stage, since I'm supposed to come to the front of the stage anyway. Can you see it? That, I don't know who he is, we don't know what tribe he's from, but there was something about him that he became kind of a Rorschach to me. Sometimes you look at him and he looks sad, sometimes he looks defiant, sometimes he looks angry, sometimes he looks scared, and I said, if I'm ever going to do, he haunted me. I actually have him on my desktop in a little corner. And I said, if he told me, he sat there silently telling me, if you're ever going to write a book about Native people, if you think you can write a book about Native people, you better put me in that book. You better answer the question. Answer the question that my presence asks. So this little guy became Levi in my mind. And his little brother, Reuben, was the boy that was from that other-minded, as they say. So they became the starting point for this book. And that was how the book developed. That was how it spun out. And you notice that I started with them. When I put the book together, I didn't know where the book was going to start. Since Stanton has that way of declaring from the beginning, I guess it all began on the day I had to put Sweet Girl down. That would be a logical place to start. It's a good narrative place to start. But instead I said, no, I put the little guys out front first. They're just drop in the middle of things. I like to start in the middle of a situation and have to write my way out of it. So they started it, and a lot of the first part of the book was on quite a great length with just the two of them. And then Danny shows up, and then the others show up and sort of walk on stage one by one. But I'm glad I started with the little guys, because I cared about them, and I had a great time learning about them. So, God, I'd like to do one more thing, but I said I was going to ask you questions, but I'm not. I will, because there's one more thing I wanted to do that I think is kind of interesting. Here we go again. If I fall over, God, I wish what happened? How did I get to this point? Here we go, yeah. Oh, you're 86 and you don't have this problem. I'm coming up behind, but I'm not there yet. Anyway, I'm taking the time to do this because I think it's kind of interesting. How did I write this book? I mean, I told you, what I wanted to do and the sort of overall method I used, but the nuts and bolts of how I actually created the book, I think are kind of interesting. I have a funny way of working. Like I said, I have to create a scene in my mind's eye. And what I do in the case of this book, what I did is I would drive through the Dakotas and I would take notes, carry a little tape recorder like this with me. And I would do something like I would write, in fact, here's what I had in one section. I'm just taking notes, and this is transcribed from the tape. Gravel road, hillside, solitary windmill with broken wooden blades, rusted legs, heat. Shimmering images of mirages off asphalt, corrugated steel water trough, cows still as statues. Single tree like a broken hand, barbed wire, heat, small farm lake, reeds up to the edge, bracken, stinks of heat and manure, mosquitoes, black flies, cracked earth. Okay, these are the notes that I've taken. And then what do I have in the back of my mind? I have experiences that I want to try to share because I look upon myself as a teacher. I'm a teacher who, I try to entertain you, but ultimately my job is to teach. I think the teachers have the most important job in the world, and I have to play my role as the best I can. So I said, all right, what are some of the experiences I have in the background of working with Native people, the stories they've told me? Well, they told me about being in boarding schools and being hit on the back of the leg with sticks. They're told about being beaten with belts. That I know that there was one story a man told me about how he was given a banana, and he'd never had a banana before. So he picked up the banana and he bit into it and bit the top of it. And he said, "This is awful." And if I remember correctly, he got hit for doing it, but he didn't know anything about bananas, and that just fascinated me. And then then there is the practice that some of the Dakota people have told me about offering the first bite of food as a gift to the departed spirits of someone. So here's what I have. I take those things and I mix them up. And here's the one reading that I'll do. I just decided to pull this one out. I could have picked any of the chapters and shown how I mix these things up. But this was just an ordinary chapter, but you probably remember it. Banana, okay? Levi. The chocolate was melting. I had to let Reuben eat it. He said 3 bars. I wanted to make him happy. He was eating them all. His hands were all covered with chocolate. His face, too. He's held his hands up to me. See, he said, chocolate. He had a big smile. We need to find a place to rest, I told him. It was too hot. We had walked like a mile. The Chinoopa stone was heavy. I didn't think I could go much further. I didn't know what to do with all the food. I'd bought it to seem like it was Sichu so the store woman wouldn't know. It was too heavy to carry. The cheese was melting. There's a pond over there, I said. It was small, like a place for cows to drink, right off the road. There were tall weeds around it. We could sit in the weeds and not be seen. We could eat the bread. I could put the bag down. The stone for Grandpa's Chinoopa was getting hard for me to carry. We went to the pond. It was mostly dry. The dirt around the edges was shriveled up and cracked. Kia would like this, Reuben said. Kia's happy, I said. Stop worrying about Kia. Reuben got sad-faced. He was thinking about Kia again. I thought to give him the banana. I thought to make him laugh. I have something for you. We need to wash your face and hands. We went to the water. It was dirty. It smelled like cow. I splashed it on Reuben's face. He squirmed and fought. I don't want to drink this. Your face is all chocolate. I have to clean it. Mama doesn't like us to have a dirty face. I'm not drinking it. You don't have to drink it. I thought to the thermos jar. I wish we still had it. I was thirsty. I didn't want to drink the cow water either. Here, I said. What's that? It's a banana. The Wasichu eat them. We had them in school. He bit on the skin just like I did. He pulled at it with his teeth. I don't like this, he said. Pull and twist, I said. He twisted the end with his teeth and pulled at it like jerky. The banana split part way and the peel part came open. Put your finger in there, I said. He pulled out some of the eating part. Taste it. He smiled big. It's good, he said. I showed him how to peel it, take the peel down, and he ate it all. I like this banana, he said. I want to go to that school. They hit you there, I said. How hard? Pretty hard on the back of the legs with a stick, sometimes with a belt. Like a horse? Kind of. I don't want to be hit like a horse. It hurts a lot. Do you have another banana? No. What's in the bag? I have cheese, I have bread, I have some cake things. I want the cake things. I gave him the hostess cake. He stuffed it all in his mouth and made funny noises and opened his mouth wide so I could see all of the cake. They hit you at school if you do that, I said. What? Open your mouth wide like that with food in it. Do they have these at that school? No. I don't want to go to that school then. He was talking in circles, but he was talking with a smile face. I did not want to stay there. There were mosquitoes. Reuben was hitting at them. They were biting everywhere. Reuben started to cry. The mosquitoes had him scared. I want to see Grandpa, he said. When he got scared, he asked for Grandpa. I don't want Grandpa to be dead. He had not talked like this since the train. Grandpa's not dead, I said. I didn't like that thought. I didn't know why he was having it. I took out the chunk of redstone and spit on it and rubbed it red. See, this is for Grandpa. It's the same as his pipe. Reuben put his head on me. I want Grandpa to have a pipe. I'm happy now, he said. His talk had made me feel fear. I had not thought of Grandpa dead. I took the bread. I tore off a piece. I gave him part of the piece to Reuben. Throw it in the water, I said. Why? For Grandpa's spirit, I said. He will hear us and know we are coming. We threw our bread in the water. Reuben put his arms around my neck. I hear Grandpa now, he said. I hid my face so Reuben wouldn't see. I knew my eyes were showing tear-like. The sun was hot. The mosquitoes were biting. I did not hear Grandpa. I did not hear anything. So a simple chapter, but you see how I wove that information together. And each of the chapters is done in that fashion. Each of the characters is done in that fashion. There's knowledge embedded. one of my sort of literary mantras to myself is to try to move gently over deep waters. And in this case, the whole book is absolutely, it has embedded knowledge and embedded wisdom from the Native people all the way through. And that was my goal, was to get that out there for people, to get these kids, so you would see real people, so there would be a sense of redemption and a sense of hope and a sense of commonality, that even though they're all different people, they're all good people struggling for their own point of view, and in the end, they come together for a common purpose that none of them even knew existed, and they're held together at the center of it all by the power of this pipe. So anyway, that was going to be 10 minutes. How did I do? I'm done. Ready to go. But so that's sort of a mishmash of how the book came to be and what it meant to me. So please ask me, talk to me, say something so I know what you think. Now that you know what I think. Anybody? Oh, we got somebody. All right, a talker.
Why did Karl Martin and Lila's son die? What was behind him?
The reason he died in the book was because he was caught between two cultures. And this, again, since you asked it in that form, that's a good place to bring in a man that I knew, a Lakota man, contacted me one time and said he had been part of I forget what they call it, but where they were taken from their homes and was put up for adoption to white families, and he'd been adopted by a white family out in Seattle. And he had gone back to visit his family on Rosebud, and the family had rejected him. They didn't know him, he had their name, but he was a white kid, to their minds, a white kid from Seattle. And he said that I don't belong with them, I don't belong with those people in Seattle. Sometimes I think I should just kill myself. And so that fellow stuck in my mind and my heart. And so that was really why I had this boy kill himself. He got caught between two cultures.
As long as we're on the two culture thing, I have a friend who, 25, 30 years ago, when he was a teacher, and he went to a reservation in South Dakota, I don't want to say which one, to study. He's a white guy. And he came back with a lot of stories. He put together a little book, but he got flack for it. Is that those days over, or do you ever get flack for stuff like this?
So that's part of the reason why I am not a well-known author, because I've done something that is very high risk, and the Native people love my work. The ones who, the ones on the reservations. I get into some trouble, mostly with white librarians. Sorry about that. But no, they're usually university librarians who say, and a lot of times with white academics that trafficking in Indian themes for fun and profit. And I say it's not fun, and you give me half your money, and I'll throw all mine away. But it's a big issue, and part of the reason I have trouble is I have had trouble in that regard. Is I try to enter into the characters. I try to tell their stories. I was worried at first, and when early on in doing my writing, there was some skepticism about who I was. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to pull myself out as a narrator completely in this book, because I've earned the right and I've earned the respect of the Native people. They have me come and talk at their colleges. They have me they like my work. They recognize that I'm not trying either to be an anthropologist looking at them from the outside, nor am I trying to inhabit their belief structure. But it's a very, very difficult line to walk, because if it goes wrong, if you look like you're an anthropologist, or if you look like you're trying to appropriate their spiritual values, you're pretty well excoriated for it, and sometimes hated for it. I can understand what happened to your friend. He was trying to do something good, trying to tell the stories. We have this, it's an irony that this is the case. If someone goes to Denmark and comes back and says, oh, I learned about Higgy, or whatever this thing is where, you're, whatever the various terms, I don't know what they are. Or I went to Norway, and comes back, people say, great, that's all interesting. Look at that, we're expanding our understanding of the world. But if you come back with native values, you're considered to having appropriated theirs and stolen them. And a lot of this is because people do traffic in them. There are all these people out there selling ceremonies and claiming to have Cherokee grandmothers and stuff, and I don't blame the native people for being disgusted with it. But if you can strip it away and say, here are the values that I see underneath this, and I'm not trying to claim that I am that person. I'm trying to share some of what I learned. In my case, I've gotten over that hump, but I think things are better now than they used to be. I think that when I first started doing this, there weren't enough Native voices out there. And people thought, well, why are you speaking for Native people? Well, now, generations have passed. There's a lot of Native writers out there who are telling their stories. So it's tough, and you will be brutalized for it. But in my case, it sort of felt like a moral responsibility. I just stayed with it. And the high-level explanation of it, I call it the bad cat syndrome. I just keep going back and showing up on their front porch. And finally, they let me in the door.
I'm wondering, Reuben, is he an elder, even though he's a youngster? Did you try to put some of the elders' spirituality into Reuben?
In Reuben? Yes, I tried to. That was, they talk about the old souls, the people who don't have, and there's a passage in there at one point where Old Lone Dog talks about how Reuben has to be protected because Reuben is one of the old ones. He has ancient knowledge, and so his knowledge, like they talk about how how when he was a kid, he talked to the prairie dogs, and the prairie dogs talked back to him. And the Native people have this, I think it's a pretty wonderful way of looking at the world, that they say that there are patterns. And when something breaks the pattern, it's sacred, and you look at it. And Reuben broke the pattern. So his knowledge is deep knowledge. And that was if there's among the themes in the book, it's that Levi has to be raised in a way that allows him to continue to be Reuben's protector, because there aren't too many of these old folks. And even now, I don't know any real kids like that, but I do know when I've met some of the real elders, not the ones who are just old guys, but they're almost all gone now, the ones who didn't speak, English wasn't their original language, and had a different level of relationship to the natural world. They could speak to animals, understand animals. When there is someone that has this kind of knowledge, the Native people try to protect them. And I wanted to put that in Reuben, so he could, and if I ever wrote another book, and I doubt that I will in this particular theme, that would be what would happen, is how Reuben has to be protected as he gets older, and hopefully how he shares his knowledge, or his wisdom.
I'm not going to hold you quiet. I'll stay here all day.
Okay, well,
So you talked about this a little bit, kind of at the very beginning, how you embodied and heard each voice in each character. It's the one thing that struck me about this book so much, how you got the language right for each character. How did you do that? I'm truly just fascinated by that.
Well, I'm not sure. No, really, I'm not. I gotta go back a bit. I had a weird experience as a kid. My dad was the director of disaster services for Hennepin County. And so at like ages 11, 12, 13, 14, I would be ripped out of my bed at night. My dad, he couldn't communicate real well, but everything we did was sort of symbolic. He'd come and he'd say, Kent, there's a fire on the north side. I'd knock on the door at 2 in the morning. There's a fire on the north side. You want to go? And I want to be with my dad, of course. So I'd get up and we'd go, and I'd be out there seeing, them pulling the body of a boy out of a fire. Or the one that I remember the most was on Cedar Lake, sitting out there in the middle of the night when they were dragging for a boy's body, and then it was getting cold, summer cold. The mother was sitting on the beach in the dark, and there was no one else there other than the people dragging for the body with a flashlight going back and forth with a grappling hook in Cedar Lake. And then they pulled, at one point a guy said, we got something, pulled it up, and here's the bloated body of this little boy. And the mother screamed. You never unhear that scream. Okay, so this is the kind of thing I go through. And then I go back home, my dad gets done with his job, and I go back home, I get in my bed, and I wake up in the morning, and the sun is out, and it's time for me to go to school, and I'm thinking, God, I wonder if I got a new pimple today. I wonder if Cindy Waring is going to like me. I mean, my belt isn't very cool. And it's like, I lost something of what you're supposed to have. And I'm glad I did. My own life never became very important to me. I don't have a whole lot of ego, and I state that simply, just the way it is, because I became a watcher and a listener. And it fits very well in with the Native people, because that's sort of the way they are. So I learned to listen, and like I said, not just inflections, not just dialects, not just pacing, but I hear spaces and conversations. I catch meanings that that other people don't catch. And so when I sat down to write, I know how to be that person, because somehow, by sheer dint of circumstance, I developed the ability to enter into other people's consciousness. Maybe if I try to enter into your consciousness, I might not get it, but I might know how you work if we talk for a while. I might understand something. And all of them were characters that I was able to enter into. And usually there was some touch point with someone that I knew. If you look at the dedication of the book, each of the people there is someone, I think I call them elders and mentors. They're all people. Brother James actually was a man who was a combination of a black guy that I used to work with at the Minneapolis Golf Club, and a man named Bud Thompson, who just died recently, who was 99, who was sort of one of my mentors, who was a traveling troubadour in Kansas. And so I sort of put those two together, and I knew how to find each of those characters. And once I got inside of them, I knew how to bring them alive. But finding the character was always the hard thing. And if there's a touch point, then I can get inside of them. That's a really fun question, thank you. I wish I had a better answer. I mean, that's not a bad answer, but it's not, I still don't really know how I can do it. But when I go back and read this book now, I say, well, that's another thing. It's really fun to go back and read something you've done and say, damn, how did I do that? I don't think I could. And you go back through all your books after years of doing it, and you look at each of them, and you better have given it your best shot, because if you look at it and say, no, you were faking it here, then you don't feel good about yourself. So.